Hello, everyone. Welcome as you are coming in. It is good to see you. My name is Justin Rivers. I am Chief Experience Officer with Untapped New York. It is my pleasure to have you here today for The Secrets of St. Mark's Place. This tour is being led by John DeSanto. John DeSanto is in the process of re-signing back on. He was having a computer issue. So we are dealing with a technical issue. We will hopefully have him back in about a couple of minutes. So I would like to welcome everybody here who is joining us for the first time or who purchased a ticket to join us today. Welcome. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our insiders, our Untapped New York subscribers. Just to let you know, thanks, Morbo. Just to let you know that you too could be an Untapped New York subscriber and insider if you would like to get access, full and complete access to all of these talks, and also 100 plus videos in our video archive. Thank you all for saying hello in the chat. Morbo, thank you for the comments on my kitchen. Peter Tannen, good to see you from San Francisco. Peter Taylor from Union Square. Hi, Mel. Good to see you. Mary Ellen, welcome from New Jersey, my home state. It's where I was born. Lorraine, hello from Asheville. Christopher from Staten Island. Nancy from Tuckahoe. Eve from San Francisco. The list just keeps going on and on and on. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully, we will have John DeSanto with us in a moment. He was with me 2 minutes before we went live. And then his computer shut down on him. Hello, Howard from New Jersey. Jack, good to see you from the East Village. Gareth from Wales, good to see you, Gareth from Wales. Always nice to see international insiders as well and attendees. Coming at you myself from Brooklyn, New York. Paula from Murray Hill. Brooke, hello from NYC native New Yorker. Good. Hopefully John will be with us again any second. He was having some trouble with his computer freezing. I think it's John.
Hi there. So sorry.
Oh, that's all right, John. Listen, you have to crack a couple eggs to make an omelet, John. Sheila from Yorkville, welcome. Here's what I'm going to do. I think let's just get started, John.
Sure.
You know the drill. If anything happens technically, if in case you are thrown off again for whatever reason, just log back in. We'll wait for you for a couple of minutes, and then we'll keep going.
Hopefully, for all of you nice people out there, this won't happen. But I thank you for joining us today. So let's see. Let's hit.
So hit your screen share at the bottom, John.
Yep. Share.
Welcome, Frida. I'm going to keep welcoming people. I'm also going to let you know that John DeSanto is one of our favorite tour guides here at Untapped New York. He is currently leading our Grand Central tour, our coffee tour of Greenwich Village. A lot of good stuff.
Okay, where am I going from here? Is this
Keynote?
Keynote.
Yes, and some of you may remember John from our talks of his storied career in the restaurant industry in New York, the Rainbow Room, Windows on the World. I'm forgetting one. Four Seasons, the most important.
Okay.
There you go. All right, hit play. And we are good. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us through this technical issue. Seems like connectivity is
all right.
slow.
Thank you very much, Justin Rivers. Thank you. Talk about a tour guide.
My
mentor is very, very good to me. Anyway, welcome everyone. My name is John, and today we're going to take a walk across St. Mark's Place. We'll stop into Tompkins Square Park as well. I live about 6 blocks north of St. Mark's Place and Tompkins Square Park. And it was when I saw Dr. Fauci had made his mark on St. Mark's Place that I said, you know, this place is pretty cool. So many things have happened here. So many people have passed through. And it's turned out to be, I hate to use the term rabbit hole, but it is. You can talk about so many things in this particular area. It's just amazing. So the Lenape Indians were here. You had the Dutch, Irish, Jewish. The Germans settled in here quite a bit. Big group then. Marxists, socialists, beats, hippies, yippies, and punks. Everyone has stopped in and added their little colorful touch to this piece of real estate. Speaking of real estate, I just brought out this map because I wanted to show you where we're talking about. Above the map, or top of the map, it says New York Island. And right below Island, it says Salt Meadows. On this particular part of Manhattan was one of the largest salt marsh and open tidal meadows on the island. It had its own ecosystem. And 400 years ago, the Lenape Indians, they camped in the forest that would become St. Mark's Place and Tompkins Square. Just a little bit west, in an area they called Kintekoying, there was sort of a crossroads of paths there. It was called the Crossroads of Three Nations, and today that is Astor Place. That's where we catch our 6 train to get to Grand Central Terminal. But the Lenape hunted deer. They did their fishing from here. And again, it was the largest salt marsh ecosystem in Manhattan. Much of this land became the farm for Peter Stuyvesant. And one of the reasons that the farm was so big is because the land was so cheap because of the salt marsh. But his farm went from the East River to about 4th Avenue, and from 20th Street to like East 5th Street. His sons and his nephews and his family expanded on that, but he had that whole property. And as a matter of fact, he built an ice skating pond and a windmill on 10th Street and 2nd Avenue while he was there. And that's pretty cool. I went ice skating last night. I love ice skating. So we'll move on. So this is the residence of Nicholas William Stuyvesant, and this is on St. Mark's Place. This was between 1st and 2nd Avenue. Beautiful building, but of course, Peter was gone at this point. But this was a very upscale, bucolic neighborhood, and mostly owned by the Fish, Stuyvesant families. But of course, Mr. Stuyvesant sat on his porch facing north. He had no intention of looking south to the town that he lost, the city that he lost, and he spent his last days right up there, right on St. Mark's Place. Tompkins Square Park. It's just a quick map. I just give you a little bit of history of the park itself. It was named after Daniel Tompkins. He was the 4th governor of New York, and he also served as a vice president for James Monroe, the 6th vice president of our country. This was sold to the Stuyvesant family sold this to the city in 1834 to have, and this is a quote, to have a prosperous and genteel future. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. There's been a lot of bloodshed in this particular park. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But from now, I want to, if you look in the middle, sort of the north center, where the brick building is, there is a monument. This monument is for the boat, one of the worst disasters in American history. As a matter of fact, it was the worst disaster until 9/11. The Slocum, General Slocum ship, as you see here, there's a boy and a little girl on this monument. This was pretty much a German enclave at this particular date, June 15th in 1904. The Slocum took off from the 3rd Street Pier with over 1,000 people on board for a Sunday picnic. It set sail with mostly German families, mostly women and children, only because most of the men were working at the time. The boat caught fire, and a brisk wind fanned the flames. By the time the captain grounded the boat on the North Brother Island near Hell's Gate, all three decks had sort of burned into the water with people jumping out. Now, the lifeboats were wired tight to the boat. No one could get them. The fire hoses were made out of canvas, and they just sort of turned to dust as they were tried to be used. So they lost 1,021 people on this boat. And this is the only monument to that particular disaster. And again, repeating that only 9/11 was worse. Now here's the General Slocum. As you can see, it's a very, very large boat. Here's some press from the Binghamton Press. The bodies were washing ashore for weeks, and it was quite horrific. And dedicated this monument by the Sympathy Society of German Ladies. Now, this is a unidentified victims for the Slocum disaster. This is down Avenue A and 6th Street. But if you notice the funeral carts, so the funeral trucks, they had to get every single one that was in Manhattan to take care of all these people that lost souls, that lost their lives. Well, here we are at back at Tompkins Square Park. This particular fountain that we have here was built in 1988 by Henry Cogswell. Henry Cogswell was a dentist, and he invested his money on several of these elaborate drinking fountains in cities who thought they needed moral guidance. They were called temperance statues and temperance fountains. Faith, love, and charity, temper. I hate to think what might have been in that fountain over the years as we talk about the people who lived in the park. But it's a beautiful fountain, and it usually wasn't very well appreciated, but it was fresh drinking water. Here it is in the 1900s. They were not always well received. Now, there's been all sorts of problems at the park. In 1870, labor unrest grew in New York City. That was the first riot here. 7,000 people descended on Tompkins Square Park, mostly unemployed, and the police came through with horses and batons and pretty much beat the crowd back. That was the first bloodshed on Tompkins Square Park. In 1980, now we're getting closer to our era here, the police and the residents, I use the word residents, actually they were squatters in the park and also in the buildings around the park. They clashed over the closing hours, meaning they're trying to basically clear out the park so they can clean it up and get the homeless out of there. And the homeless were not only just people who weren't financially viable, they were mostly kids who left home and it was sort of a bad and rough scene. Here's some of the squatters that were in the park. They're some unsavory characters, especially this guy right here with the chicken. Let me see. This guy is Daniel Rakowitz. In 1989, Daniel Rakowitz was going out with this nice young lady named Monica Burrell. Monica kicked him out of her apartment, and he murdered his girlfriend. He chopped her up and fed her stew to the homeless in Tompkins Square Park. He was known as the Butcher of Tompkins Square. This is a true story. He is in Ward's Island right now, and he will be for the rest of his life. But this is Mr. Rakowitz. Now this, I pretty much remember. This is a little bit later, but this is the 1980s. The police gathered at 14th Street and Avenue A to march down Avenue A to move the people out of the park. But not only did they have the cops, I saw an armored tank with a battering ram instead of a cannon head down into Tompkins Square Park, and they were bashing in the doors to get the squatters out of the housing that was around the park. Another quick picture. More bloodshed in Tompkins Square Park. Now, for every group that moved in here, the other group that lived there before always complained, and that was true for any generation that came through here. Here's someone complaining about the punks who were moving into apartments they wanted for families. Today, the park is pretty mellow. I know it for a fact. My daughter just has a new dog now, and I'm using the dog park in Tompkins Square Park, and it's quite nice. Wigstock, as you can see here, got its start at Tompkins Square Park, and there's all sorts of food kitchens here, giving out food to the homeless, and a lot of nice bands play during the weeks. Summer, very, very nice. Charlie Parker. Oh, he has a jazz festival in the park as well. He lived, by the way, on the Avenue B. This is his building. He actually overdosed on heroin here. He overdosed here, but it's Avenue B and approximately 9th Street. Charlie Parker's house. So now we walk across Avenue A, and we hit St. Mark's Place. And let's see, what do we have here? This is number 9698 St. Mark's Place. This building is pretty nondescript, except it was used for an album cover for Led Zeppelin, for their Physical Graffiti album. And right across the street where this picture was taken was where Abby Hoffman left, and Jerry Rubin. We continue down the street, and here we are at the Theater 80, St. Mark's Place, which has its own, New York's own Walk of Fame. There was a number of theaters here. This was considered the Jewish Rialto when they were living in the neighborhood. You had the Yiddish Hall of Fame in front of the 2nd Avenue Deli, which was uptown just a little bit, a few blocks up 2nd Avenue. But Howard Otway opened Theater 80 in 1971, showing vintage films from the golden era of Hollywood, and he invited legendary movie stars to come watch their movies, and then he asked them to leave their handprints and signatures in cement. Let me see. Here we go. There's Howard Otway. Maureen Stapleton here getting her handprint. This is a very funny picture, only because I was talking to Lorcan Otway. Lorcan Otway is the son of Howard, and he was very kind to me. He let me come into the theater and take a look at some of these pictures. He said the reason they're holding on to her because she was quite intoxicated when she was doing her handprint and her signature, so they didn't want her face in to the cement. But outside, you can see this. It's right outside. There's Myrna Loy. Joan Blondell with her footprints as well. Ruby Keeler. Ruby Keeler here. I'm going slow because I don't want this to freeze up on me, ladies and gentlemen. Gloria Swanson. Joan Crawford. She didn't have enough room to write her whole name, but that is for Joan. 1977. Dom DeLuise. There's Joan Rivers. Just lots of cigarette butts. And one of my favorites, Kitty Carlisle. She was always a great customer in one of the restaurants I used to work in. I remember she had lunch with Deborah Harry with me at the Four Seasons one day. But Kitty was a very, very nice lady. Now, I was very lucky. Lorcan invited me inside of the theater where there's great work being done here. They're renovating the whole place. And he was showing me here, this is an example of how they tried to save some money back in the day. because they use bottles to fill up the space instead of cement. And he was one example of how they did that. Now, there was also a bar connected to this. It still is. And it's called the Barnacle Bar, and was very, very active during Prohibition. So here is the stage. And I should say, I'm going to try to see if we can get the video going here. I hope this works, folks. But if you see the door just to the right of the light going back, and you went to the center backstage, there's a door there. That's where people enter to drink at the bar during Prohibition, but I'll show that to you in just a second. Let's see if I can do this. Whoops, let me just do this once. Whoops. Just give me a second, folks. Let's see if this works. I apologize. No, it's not working. Oh, here we go. It's going to be a cabaret nightclub. As you see, they're doing a lot of work on it. Now, this is the door that came in through the back of a butcher shop on 2nd Avenue. You would go down a pair of stairs, make a right-hand turn, and you would be in the William Barnacle Tavern. Your grandmother drank here during Prohibition, unless she was a Baptist. That means she drank at home. But the bar is classic, and I'm very sorry I didn't take a picture of it. It's the bar that was there originally. It has a beautiful decanters for serving absinthe during the Prohibition. And as we in the restaurant business says, absinthe makes the heart grow fonder. So we're going to keep an eye on this, because I think this is going to be a great walking tour one of these days when they finish this, because he's going to open a mobster museum in here as well. And this was mob owned, obviously, during Prohibition. And as a matter of fact, there was a safe that was left there that they found money in, and they were asked very politely to return that money, and they did so quietly. That's Lorcan's story. I'll let him tell it to you when we do that. Here's a playbill, not a playbill, but a poster. Shelley Winters wrote a play, and this was Robert De Niro's first name on a theatrical poster. It's hanging inside the thing. Now, this is Leon Trotsky's room. It's right next to the theater. Lorcan Otway says he used to sit by that and write his manuscripts there. Leon Trotsky. All right, we move along. We get to Sarah Curry Way. Sarah Curry, not too many people know about her. She witnessed too many deaths of children on the street, whether it was from trolleys or horses or all sorts of traffic that was going on. So she opened her home to the children whose mothers and fathers were mostly working during the early 1900s. So it was really the first daycare center. She is known for having the first daycare center in New York City. Her name is up there. It's very nice to know, but not too many people know about Sarah Curry. But that's her story. The Gem Spa. What a shame. What a shame. Meet me at the Gem Spa. Folks, we lost this in 2020. Gem Spa was home of the Egg Cream, a gathering place to meet. Here's a picture of Allen Ginsberg. You could get your underground newspapers here, or an umbrella, or anything you need. The Beats, the hippies, everyone stopped by Gem Spa, and we lost it during the pandemic last year. Okay, this is 33 Marks Place. Doesn't look like much except for another one of about 20 Asian restaurants, or Thai restaurants, I should say, on St. Mark's Place. This was the home of the Manic Panic clothing store. It was run by the Bolomo sisters from the Bronx. They got their start. They got very cheap rent. The place was a wreck when they got it. And they went to London and brought back Beatle boots, which started them on their infamous career on St. Mark's Place. They slept in their store because if they didn't, they were robbed pretty much every night. And actually, they invited all their friends to sleep with them to come keep them safe and sound and keep the people out from stealing. It was getting to be a very rough neighborhood in the late 60s, early 70s. But these ladies were part of a big scene there. They knew all the rock bands and things like that, and their story is pretty interesting, but that's another rabbit hole I can't go into right now. But they come into the story a little bit later as well. This was known as the Dom. This was part of the Polish National Home, which is a very big building. It went from 19 to 23 St. Mark's Place. The Dom was a bar downstairs. As you see, people are enjoying themselves. It was a downstairs bar, but upstairs they had a whole banquet area, a very big space, bigger than the Dom below. This was one stairway down, the other was one stairway up. And what they did upstairs is a group of investors or a group of people started the balloon farm. Milton Glaser part of the design. It was the first psychedelic light show, and that was upstairs. Let's see. Well, Andy Warhol came in a second. Let me just talk about the balloon farm. They did the first light shows with those psychedelic, oily colored lights. And I have a friend, Charlie Rothschild, who was producing some of the shows up there on the balloon farm, at the balloon farm upstairs. And he just told me a nice story about how they had to serve food. It was part of the deal for the liquor license and things like that. So they moved a hot dog cart up into the ballroom and the balloon farm, and that was their food of choice for everyone who went there. Andy Warhol got in the act. He rented the same space. He called his show The Exploding Plastic Inevitable. The Velvet Underground, his house band, would be playing there every Saturday. Nico, the pop girl of '66, it says right here, sang there as well. There's Nico. It's funny, I read some passages about the Exploding Plastic Inevitable, and John Waters wasn't sure, but he thought it was an act or it was true, but the Velvet Underground was shooting up on stage as they were performing. And there's Lou Reed in the foreground there with Nico and the band. That went on for a little while. It was very, very popular. Of course, Jackie Onassis eventually went, and that, of course, made anything legitimate. There you go. It started the raves of today, and it was a big place to be and be seen. Now, when the electric exploding plastic inevitable, you can't say it 5 times twice. I can't do it once. The Electric Circus took its place for a few years after that. But of course, then the Fillmore East opened up on 2nd Avenue, and that was sort of the end of the Polish home and Electric Circus. All right, moving down the street. Here we are. This was the St. Mark's Baths. A lot of action in this house. It was the baths. Of course, the administration during the AIDS epidemic were really hard on these places. They really wanted them to go, but they were very popular. There was one guest who boasted that he went to New Year's Eve at the Turkish baths, at the St. Mark's Baths, I should say, and he had 3 orgasms before midnight, and sounded like a very satisfied customer to me. And the Belomo sisters used to say they could see the little cubicles as you overlook the building from other buildings, and they would all wave to each other, and it was always very, very busy. It was eventually closed down during the AIDS epidemic, but a really wild place. It did turn into the Boy Bar, a gay bar. There were steps to go up, and you would be met by a host. And it was illegal to be have a DJ and dancing. So anyone who came in would have to stop and see the host, who would signal the DJ, who was in the back, who would put away his equipment, and they had to walk along a sort of a walkway and then down some steps and then into the boy bar. But by the time they got there were just some men standing around, drinking their drinks, listening to Maureen McGovern singing "There's Got to Be the Morning After." I don't know. They just they hid themselves pretty well. Boy bar lasted for a while, and then it turned into Coney Island High. James Fenimore Cooper also lived in this building beforehand. 6 St. Mark's Place. All right, this is the, I can read it. I don't know German, but you can read it right across. The German American Shooting Society. This was a beautiful building left by the remnants of the German population that was here. Clubhouse for them. It's still there, and it's still absolutely gorgeous. On St. Mark's Place, we have the Puerto Rico Importing Company, but this is a blatant advertisement for Untapped. If you're ever interested in going on our coffee tours, let us know. I guide one of them once in a while too. But they are located here, and try the French mocha. It's a great blend. All right, 4 St. Mark's Place, beautiful building, one of the 3 original buildings that are left in the area. I shouldn't say on St. Mark's Place, but in the area. But this one is, and this one was the home of Mrs. Alexander Hamilton, Eliza, her daughter Eliza, and her son Alexander Jr. Whoops, excuse me. Constructed in 1831, but it's one of the original ones. But interesting enough that this had other businesses in it, including Trash and Vaudeville. Now, Trash and Vaudeville, you can see here, this was before it moved to Avenue A. Trash and Vaudeville was there it opened in 1975. And it's hard to believe that Mrs. Alexander Hamilton lived here, and Trash and Vaudeville was a staple here for so many years. But Jimmy Webb was the owner. Let's see if I can do here. What do I have here? Oh, this is what it looked like in the 80s. And you have to understand, if you go back, here was Alexander Hamilton's wife's house. It's in between a bathhouse and the St. Mark's Hotel, which was pretty known for its prostitution. Pretty rough neighborhood for such a glamorous house. This is in the 70s. I'm sorry, this is 1982. And here it is today. Actually, it looks pretty good. As you can see, they're trying to rent the space. Trash and Vaudeville is gone. And so is Jimmy Webb. Here's Jimmy Webb. I can't say I know this man, but I've talked to him. I've chatted with him just a couple of times. He moved his Trash and Vaudeville to Avenue A, and we lost him to the COVID last year as well. But he started in this store when he was 16 years old. And that was in 1975. So he was a heroin addict, and he got himself clean. And he had a lot to say about St. Mark's, and he wrote a lot about it in a sense that he loved the place. He thought it was the artists and the musicians and everyone who came through. The Ramones, Deborah Harry, Bruce Springsteen, he dressed them all. He really only complained about the drug use because people were living in alcoves at a certain point in the 70s, and defecation and sex on the street and things like that. It was a tough neighborhood to work, but he always liked the creative types who added something. He just thought that the drug use didn't add anything to his neighborhood that he loved so much. But if you wanted to buy your leopard print pants and your bondage pants and skinny jeans and your Doc Martens, this is where you go. This is where Justin Rivers got his clothes way back when. In any case, he'll model them for them later. All right, we've come to the end of St. Mark's Place, and we have Cooper Union. We all know Peter Cooper, a self-taught genius. Built this. He made the first American locomotive. He promoted the Atlantic cable, helped develop the telegraph. Most of his money was from his ironworks, New Jersey, and his glue factory in Baltimore. He turned his millions into philanthropy, and by establishing Cooper Union as a free educational institution for poor students, catering to both men and women and to adults as well as young people specializing in architecture, engineering, and practical arts. Now, one interesting fact about the building is that he built in elevator shafts before there were elevators. And when Elijah Otis opened up his elevator business, he actually created elevators that would fit into this building. Very thought on his part. Cooper Union, the front of the building. Very pretty. And of course, this was the site of the Lincoln Address. Might Makes Right. It propelled him to the presidential nomination. And this is where he gave that address. Now, I'm just walking up toward St. Mark's Church, but I had to take a picture of the Ottendorfer Library. This is my local library, the one I go to, although it is closed during the COVID crisis. But it was built in 1884, and it was built as a library, and it is a library today. It is absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful building, and I think Michelle Young has a better picture than I do. But it's fun to go there. Right now I go up to 23rd Street and use the Epiphany branch. So there we go. All right, we're going to head off Astor Place to Stuyvesant Street. I just wanted to show you, if you see Stuyvesant Street to the left, it is slanted. It's heading right towards St. Mark's and the Bowery. But this is the only true east to west street that we have in New York. The Stuyvesant family asked that it would be built that way as they were putting the grid in, and they were accommodated for this. But on Stuyvesant Street, you have the Stuyvesant Fish House. There is a plaque on there. It was built by Petrus Stuyvesant. He was a great-grandson of Peter, for his daughter Elizabeth, on the true to East and West Street. Hamilton Fish was born here, and he became New York governor and a senator as well as a president, grand secretary of state. But this is one of those original houses, one of the three that still exist. Hamilton Fish was born here. St. Mark's Church. This is where Peter Stuyvesant had his personal chapel. It was brought down to build this church. Second oldest church in the city after St. Paul's. It originally served a very affluent and conservative congregation and has long been one of the city's most active and progressive Episcopal church. The home of the Poetry Project. There are dance recitals, readings, weddings. Sam Shepard was born here. They still do services and public outreach programs here, but it's been locked up. The churchyard's been locked up because there's some very famous people in the cemetery there. Here we are with the cornerstone and the consecration. Now, this is the churchyard. It suffered a ghoulish grave robbery in 1878. The body of department store millionaire A.T. Stewart was exhumed and carted off for ransom. This is where he was buried. A bag of bones, possibly Stewart's, was recovered 2 or 3 years later in a dark lane at night after the payment of $20,000. So no one is buried under this stone here. Right here, he is now in Long Island. And an interesting thing that happened here. Oh, excuse me. I apologize. I'm going through some of the same pictures. I apologize. There's Peter Stuyvesant. There he is, peg leg. There's this. Sorry, peg leg. There he is. By the way, if you go to Stuyvesant High School, peg leg is the name of all the sports teams that they have, the peg legs. Now, I took this picture because you see the black plaque across from his statue, or just adjacent to his statue. That's where the Stuyvesant crypt is. He is buried under there. He is in the crypt along with some family members and also his slaves. He has some slaves buried with him underneath. But in the graveyard itself, which I couldn't get into, and resting undisturbed are Commodore Matthew Perry, Daniel Tompkins, the gentleman they named the park after, and members of the Fish and Stuyvesant families. This is the park today. I was walking through, and this band was playing. They're called the Pink Clouds. Now, this is a video. Unfortunately, Justin and I could not get the sound, but they have a pretty darn good following. They were pretty fun to watch, and let's see if I can show them in action. Hold on. Quite a All right, ladies and gentlemen, that sort of brings us full circle. I'm pretty much done here. And
Thank you, John.
very much for listening.
John, thank you so much. Just so you know, what you were saying over the video of the people dancing, we didn't hear. So you might want to say it again.
Okay. What I was
you don't
saying
have to show
is,
the video again. But
no, I won't show the video. I won't.
Yeah,
but
just what was your commentary while you were running the video?
I just thought that this was a great band. There was a lot of people here. No one was smoking. No one was drinking. Everyone was just dancing. I was saying behind me, there was another 75 people just having a great time. This band has a big following. And of course, on the other side of the park, there was a band that just did Beatles songs. They were much older than these people right here. And there was a jazz trio that was on the other part of the park, right near the memorial for this General Slocum. So the park is in good shape. The dog run is working. It's not the same. There's no bloodshed, no squatters. And it's nice that people are enjoying the park as they imagined it should have been.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you very much. This was, as I said, I had seen this before when we ran a run through of this, and I love the mix of facts. I love the past, the present, all the stuff that you presented to us today. And again, stuff that I didn't even know, especially with Theater 80 and all that good stuff. So if anybody has any questions for John.
Yes. Justin, can I join you on the screen?
Yeah, so hit escape. John. There you go. And I'll X you out. And here you are. It's me and you now.
Oh,
so I'm going to work backwards from the chat. Thank you for everybody who was chatting.
I'll do the best I can. There's a lot of information from this.
No worries. For those of you who were chatting, thank you. For those of us who have not seen the chat, you can access it by at the top right screen. There's a line with an arrow. You can open it up there. There was a little bit of a debate about the second oldest church building. Right. Is St. Mark's the second oldest church or the second oldest remaining? I am going to throw my hat in the ring and say it is the second oldest remaining. Trinity was the first Trinity, which burnt in 1776, was older. But and then Paula, this was a question from Paula Thompson. She said St. Paul's date was 1766, St. Mark's 1796. It was the second oldest operating house of worship in Manhattan because the Stuyvesants had a chapel there, which, as you mentioned, burned. So I am going to agree with you, Paula, and say that it's probably the second oldest remaining. But again, that might require slightly more research before I verify and stamp.
They had to get permission from Trinity they wanted only one Episcopal church.
Right.
And they had to get permission from Trinity to build that particular chapel and church. So
great.
Sorry about that. A little misleading.
No, it's all right. It's all good. I love St. Mark's on the Bowery because it's kitty corner to the of the street grid. It just sits diagonal on the street grid, so it just wasn't supposed to be, or the grid just sort of laid itself around it. Pete Tannen says, "Thank you for another great and well-researched presentation. I look forward to more." Yes, agreed. Thank you, Pete. Sylvia says, "Thank you. That was interesting." Nancy had a question. When you said his slaves were buried with Peter Stuyvesant, you didn't mean in the Egyptian pharaoh way, correct?
That is correct. They're just in the crypt.
Yeah, so Stuyvesant had a family crypt in which the slaves had their own spots in the crypt. They weren't like thrown into a tomb with him, so that they could guide him into the afterlife.
They weren't allowed to sit with the regular people in the chapel. They had to sit upstairs, but they did share a crypt in the end. So good for them.
There's also a great story I'll add to St. Mark's, which is sort of the tour guide lore. It's always mentioned, especially on ghost tours. But it's said that there sometimes is the sound of clotting sometimes at night, which was Peter Stuyvesant's ghost moving through the church with his peg leg. I love it. That's why I love New York. Lorraine says another fascinating talk. Can you say more about why the street was exactly east-west, not aligned with other streets?
Well, that was on the request of the Stuyvesant family.
Yeah, so the Stuyvesant and I'll throw in a little bit, and if anybody on the chat has good information about this, please add. The Stuyvesant family farm in Stuyvesant Street was part of the Stuyvesant estate, which had sort of been passed down. And so when they had laid the street grid over, the Stuyvesants and the Fish family had a lot of pull. So they sort of kept the street the way it was, running on the diagonal, so that their buildings were not disturbed. That was my understanding of it.
That is true.
Because the Stuyvesant farm had obviously roots all the way back to the 1650s, when Stuyvesant built that as his second home when Peter Stuyvesant was the 6th Director General. And then after the British took over, this was one of my favorite facts. I know so much about Peter Stuyvesant, and I learned John said that he would sit and face north on his farmhouse so that he didn't have to look south, because the English obviously, booted him out of power. That's such a great fact, John. I love it. That was worth the price of admission. Brandt has a question in the question section. He said, how did St. Mark's become such a hub for Japanese food?
Well, if I may, I talked about the Polish National Home. This is a big building. And I mentioned the banquet room, the hallway. The hall was huge.
Yeah.
Now at least 15 stores. And they all seem to be Thai restaurants or dumpling houses or something like that. I don't know the answer to the question, but there's a lot of stores in there now, and it's full of scaffolding. There was no good pictures of that particular area.
Okay. Colleen says, great presentation. Thank you. Made me miss my punk days on St. Mark's. Thanks. Mel says some of the questions got pinned to my name after they were written on the chat by others. Oh, sorry, Mel. I'm not sure why that was. So we're new with the Livestorm presentation format. So we're still learning some of the back end stuff. So we'll definitely take a look at that. And now they disappeared. Okay. I'll look into it, Mel. Sorry about that. Rachel says, hi, can you share a little bit more about Little Germany? And actually, we have a great article that just went out about it. So let
The
me.
Germans were the second largest group to immigrate to the city after the Irish, but they, after the Slocum disaster, they did move up north, the Upper East Side. They abandoned the neighborhood, but you're right. I don't know the whole story of the German experience, but that was the beginning of the end as far as the Slocum disaster.
So, Rachel, I just put in a great article that came out on Untapped. I believe it was last week.
That's right.
About Little Germany. Some really good information there as well. Robert Morbeck says the cop in the riot scene looked vaguely like John's pictures of himself as a young man in other presentations. Nah, it couldn't be. Robert Morbeck, Morbo. You love to be a jokester.
Robert, how did you know? That was very good of you, Robert. That was pretty good.
Were you driving that tank, John? It's funny when somebody asked, I think it was Brant asked about Japanese restaurants. So in the early 2000s, as John knows, I have a story of actually being escorted out of a bar, karaoke bar, which was a Japanese karaoke bar on St. Mark's, because I got up on the bar and started dancing. That might go along with my my leopard print, which is a joke. Craig says, I have a friend. Lorraine's laughing. I have a friend who lives near St. Mark's, but had no idea about Little Germany until I told him about your piece. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Craig. It's a really great piece. Pete says, I think in the late 19th century, New York City had the third largest German population after Berlin and Vienna. Yes. And, you know, Kleine Deutschland went all the way south past Delancey. I used to teach at a church, a Catholic school for a while called Our Lady of Sorrows on Pitt and Stanton Street, which served the German population of Kleine Deutschland, and a lot of those establishments down there from the mid to late 19th century were for the German population. It was huge. Your wild and crazy days, yeah, Rob. As I said to John, that was the only time I was ever asked to leave an establishment. I was in my socks, though. I didn't get on the bar with my shoes. So I was, my mom taught me, right? Let me keep going and see if there's any questions that I missed further up. This chat's long and robust, which is great. Oh, Craig asked, fish as in Barton and Fish, the subject of FDR's ridicule. Yes. So Hamilton Fish Sr. was frequently ridiculed by FDR because of sort of the stronghold that they had on the city. And as FDR as a governor was always sort of fighting Hamilton Fish. And again, across from the school I used to teach at Pitt and Stanton is Hamilton Fish Park, which was still is a public pool and a really gorgeous complex named after the Hamilton Fish. But the Fishes, yes, were a very well-connected political family in New York at a time when FDR was trying to clean all of that up. And he succeeded for the most part. Any other? When did the Germans move to 86th Street?
The beginning of the end was the early 1900s.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Early 20th century was when they started moving further up north. And again, as John had mentioned, the Slocum was one of the things that sort of precipitated that. And then, of course, new influxes of immigrants.
Some families lost 10 family members on the Slocum. I mean, whole families were destroyed. 10 kids killed in a family. It was awful. So
yeah, and it's one of those things, you know, historically, so many people don't know about. A, B, and we don't speak about. But it was a tremendous loss of life.
And that is the only monument to it.
No. Lorraine, only socks. No, no, Lorraine. I was fully clothed. Howard says a number of my wife's German ancestors were baptized in Our Lady of Sorrows. Get out. It's a beautiful church.
Yeah.
And the school, it was the second, I believe it was the second or third oldest school, Catholic school in the city. St. Peter's had one. St. James was the second, I know. St. James was the second. So Sorrows was the third, and St. James was where Al Smith went to school. And I used to do work with them. I was really quite lucky to educate in some of these old, gorgeous buildings on the Lower East Side and Lower Manhattan. Lorraine asks, how long did Sarah Curry have her daycare?
Good question. I don't know right off the top of my head, but
Okay.
no, I just don't know. Had to be a number of years.
Helen asks, was the Bob Dylan song Talking Bear Mountain Blues about the General Slocum disaster?
I don't know.
I think it is, Helen. I'm going to look that up. Gareth asks, Tompkins Square Park, I noticed there was an Avenue A and a B, etc. By it. I'm curious, why is that? So the grid system didn't cover any of that area from Tompkins Square eastward. Sorry for my ignorance, says Gareth. Gareth, don't ever apologize for asking a question, especially a good one. John, can you speak to the Avenue
Actually,
A?
you probably know more than I do, but of course, after First Avenue, things weren't really developed yet.
Right.
So as the city moved eastward, they had to add A, B, C, and D right to the river. So that's basically why they started with the letters instead of the numbers.
Yeah, and I can back that up to a certain degree. Actually, the gridding of the Lower East Side and Lower Manhattan past a certain area where they left the original street grid could be a whole talk within itself. But John's right. It was sort of the extension of the island of Manhattan. And of course, when the commissioner's plan of 18, I believe it was 11, was laid out, yeah, First Avenue was considered to be the edge of Manhattan. But as it grew out and as they tried to tame the streets of the Lower East Side / East Village, they switched to letters instead of numbers.
And they had to fill in that salt marsh.
Right, and the salt
there
marsh.
really wasn't anything there to work with until they built it in.
Yeah. Pete Tannen posted, the Bowery Boys have a very good podcast on the General Slocum disaster, and he posted the link to that. Thank you, Pete. Yes, and of course, growing up, even until I was teaching on the Lower East Side in the early 2000s, it was called Alphabet City. And Alphabet City was, I remember when I moved to New York, my parents who grew up in the 60s and 70s said, whatever you do, don't go to Alphabet City. And I was like, what? And of course, for some of the reasons that John touched on, it was certainly, it could be considered a dodgy area.
Oh, very much.
I think I may have been diplomatic when I said that. Gareth, thank you. Interesting. I was wondering if it was connected to that march. Yes. So in the end, yes. And of course, if you've joined us on other talks like we do of Lower Manhattan or Dutch history or remnants of the Port of New York, New York was very good at reclaiming land and extending shoreline. And wherever there was just enough land to sort of turn it into something to develop, New York did it. And that's over almost a 300-year history. It's very fascinating. So Salt Marsh was definitely prime land to be firmed up and to continue to develop. I'm still looking up this Bob Dylan song because now I'm interested. If anybody else knows, please let us know. Any other questions for John or just in general?
Okay.
No? Filling in land sounds very Dutch. Yes. Well, it starts with the Dutch. Oh, God. Craig, I could talk about this for an hour. And Beth is saying, look up neighborhood slice. Beth, if I could get it, let me see if I can get a link to it. Let me see if I could do that before we sign off. Or Beth, if you have one handy, you could put it in the chat as well. Beth Goff, also someone who gives tours for us at Untapped New York. Here it is. I got it. I believe this is it. Paste. There you go. Thank you, Joe. Yes, people used to be, well, again, in the early 2000s, I almost lived in Alphabet City because it was still late 90s, early 2000s, once I graduated, still marginally affordable, which was not the case anymore. Yeah, and of course, as Brooke just mentioned, the pioneers were really in the 70s. All right. Any other questions? This has been awesome, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very active chat, our most active in a while. So, John, that means good presentation, sir.
Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you joining us today. That's great.
I hope you enjoyed it. John, we have to get you back for another.
Stop pushing me, Justin.
All right. Listen, I'd love to have you.
Happy to do it.
All of you again, thank you very much for joining us. Again, insiders, you are most welcome. Oh, tip info. John, I almost forgot. Do you have a PayPal or a Venmo that you can put in the chat?
Well, there is a Venmo at John DeSanto 5.
Okay, I'm putting that in the chat, everybody. John DeSanto 5. And that is a Venmo account. So there it is. That's where you can find John on Venmo to tip him.
Thank you.
Yes, Pete, thank you. I was just about to chime in on that. I'm chewing gum and walking at the same time here. The Dylan song is not about the General Slocum.
I was going to say,
I didn't think it.
Well, Bear Mountain. I mean, we're looking at a whole different.
But that right. But yeah, it was something else. I never even thought about that, Helen. Good catch. All right, I am going to let everybody off to their day. It is 1:03. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, we will see you all again. And again, if you are interested in becoming insiders, for those of you who joined us by ticket, I'm going to put the information in the chat so that you can become a member. As little as $10 a month gets you unlimited access to all of this. Robin says, thank you. Very interesting. Robin, I will see you tomorrow. All right, everybody. Have a really great day. Thank you, John, again for a fascinating talk. And everybody, as always, stay safe and be well. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Ciao.